I was a new nursing assistant at a local hospital, and I worked the night shift. I was excited to finally get work after trying so hard, and I volunteered to do any task that no one else wanted to do. Most of the time, I did the hardest jobs. This way, I was able to have contact with activities of a more medical nature, or I was able to help nurses with more qualified tasks. I made a lot of new friends very quickly, and because I did a good job and was willing to help, I was one of the few nursing assistants allowed to work in the ICU. One night, I was working in the ICU, and we only had a few patients, and they were all either completely sedated or in a coma. A few hours after the shift began, an old man died. We can call him SEU Francisco. And after the family left, I went in, cleaned, dressed and transported him to the morgue. After that, the night was very calm. However, for some reason, almost everyone who was working that shift began to report throughout the night that they could feel a strange and mysterious sensation in the air. I had the strange feeling that someone was watching me. And I was even feeling some goosebumps. All rooms in the ICU have call lights that are above the room doors. As soon as the patient presses the emergency button located inside the room's call light turns on and makes a noise, alerting the medical team that the patient has pressed the button and needs to be attended to. And around 3:30 in the morning, all the call lights in the rooms started blinking, but without making any noise. Just as they had suddenly started blinking, suddenly they stopped blinking. At that moment, almost the entire ICU medical team was at the nurse's station, and one of the nurses commented on how scary it was, those lights flashing out of nowhere, and we all tried to laugh a little at the situation. Another nurse said it was probably Francisco trying to say goodbye or trying to say hello. As soon as those words left that nurse's mouth, the sound of the call light from one of the rooms reverberated throughout the ICU. At that moment, and we started looking around us and started investigating to find out which room had the patient who had called us. At that moment, we were not even able to immediately realize the fact that it was impossible for any patient to have pressed the emergency button. But as it was already very late, sometimes it is normal to be tired and not think about the details, such as thinking about the fact that all the patients that night were either sedated or in a coma. And that's when I decided to look in the opposite direction, in the direction no one was looking. I was looking at the empty room at the top of the room, the red call light was on. And inside the room, the light was also on. At that moment, the secretary of that session announced to everyone the room number that was flashing on her computer screen. And everyone froze. Everyone slowly turned their heads to look in the direction I was already looking. In the direction of the empty room that was previously occupied by Francisco. "This is impossible," a nurse said. And at that moment the call light went out, and at the same time the light inside the room also went out. We all stood there paralyzed for a few minutes, waiting for something else to happen, but fortunately, nothing else happened. We worked in complete silence for rest of that night, looking at that empty room every now and then, relieved to see nothing out of the ordinary. We never talked about what had happened, and we didn't do anything alone that night, always walking everywhere in pairs. That night was just the beginning of the scariest job I've ever had in my life. However, nothing ever surpassed that event that night.